Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is the best way for you to exit your highly appreciated real estate, business, cryptocurrency, or stock. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, sometimes tax minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. By the way, we're also streaming on expertcresecrets.com. That's expertcresecrets.com. I'm excited about our next guest. He has 50 years of financial leadership experience in a broad range of industries, including being a licensed certified public accountant. His background stretches across accounting, tax, manufacturing, construction, information technology, marketing, transportation, logistics, human resources, wholesale distribution, insurance, credit, and more. He has held his Series 7 and 66 licenses. And one of the most interesting things that I found is he's one of only 86 people in the last 16 years to pass the U.S. Tax Court Non-Attorney Practitioner's Examination, which enables him to represent clients in the U.S. Tax Court without being an attorney. Please welcome to the show with me, Charles Reed. Charles, how are you today?
Brett, I'm fine. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I also want to thank you for your service as a United States Marine, a combat veteran of the Vietnam War. And so, but for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your background and your current focus?
Sure. I grew up in Iowa. I'm a Midwestern boy. After high school, I joined the Marine Corps, spent 4 years, including 2 years overseas, and a combat tour in Nam. Came back, was stationed in Kansas City, met and married my wife. 5 children when I married her. I claim insanity, but we were married for 45 years before she passed. Found that my military experience and my training was not valued in the business world, so went to college, got my bachelor's, my master's, passed my CPA exam while still in grad school. Went to work for Texas Instruments, spent 15 years working for various companies, small and large. Then 30 years ago, Ruth and I, my wife, started our own business because I was tired of working for other people and realized I was never going to run a major corporation because I didn't have the political skills. I was unwilling to stab people in the back and toss them off the ladder. So we started our own business, and it was payroll and accounting, a mobile service. Technology changed and the mobile went away. And I sold off the accounting to my partner here about 10 years ago and focused on payroll and been growing the payroll business heavily ever since. We provide payroll and payroll-related services to small and medium-sized businesses around the country. Payroll tax service, compliance, timekeeping, workers' comp, benefits, other things, but all payroll-related.
Amazing. So, wow. So much there, and so many ways that we can go down some different avenues. And by the way, that's getpayroll.com. That's getpayroll.com to learn more about Charles Reed and the payroll services to help you out. Before we dive into, this really interesting, unique designation you have with representing the ability to represent clients at the U.S. Tax Court without being an attorney, as well as touching on some capital gains tax deferral things that are happening right now with the Biden administration proposing some changes and just the economy in general. We'll talk about. I want to take one other step back, Charles. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and some people call these strengths or superpowers. I believe they're God-given gifts, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. So I want you to go back to maybe your high school days or your university days, and when you were a younger lad. What's the maybe one or two gifts that you believe you were given, and how do those help how you help and bless people today?
Well, this was brought home to me by my staff. I'd done up an interview tape for Survivor, the TV show. And in that, they say one word to describe yourself. And I asked my staff, and they all came back unanimously and said, tenacious. I can be like a dog with a bone. I just don't give up. I just keep going and going and going. And I've been that way all my life. When I was 14, I took a bicycle in from Iowa to California to see my grandmother. Turned 15 on the way. So I don't let go of things. I get into, and that's good for my clients because I don't let go. I had one tax penalty situation that took 9 years to solve with the Internal Revenue Service. So from my point of view, the tenacity is good. From my wife's point of view, well, not so much, but it worked. It worked for me.
Absolutely love it, Charles. Tenacity, it just keep going, and when you get something, you're gonna see it through. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Keep chewing on it until there's no bone left.
Love it, love it. So now let's dive right into maybe the biggest secret to being able to show and pass an exam and be able to provide representation for clients in the U.S. tax court. We're here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions, and one of the biggest things is we want to know is if someone uses the strategy, which we specialize in, the Deferred Sales Trust. What happens if you have to face the IRS or have to face the U.S. and some kind of legal battle? So tell us about your experience with the U.S. tax court, maybe even the IRS, and some of these things over your years.
Well, I fight the IRS on almost a daily basis. We have employment tax situations, which is our specialty. The IRS in fiscal 19 issued over $13 billion in employment tax penalties. And we're specialists at getting those abated and solved. And in some cases, you have to take those situations to U.S. tax court or district court. Not wanting to be an attorney, I became a U.S. tax court practitioner. I studied for it. I decided I was going to become one, and I did. The tenacity. So it took a couple of years of study. The U.S. tax court exam once every 2 years in November in D.C. at the tax court. That's the only time they give it. They really don't want us, but they're forced to, in that it's part of the law that established the U.S. tax court that non-attorneys could practice in it. It was a holdover from the previous IRS appeals mechanism. So I sat for it and passed it here a number of years ago. But it lets me go to the court and present an argument and a petition. It's $60 to file a petition with the U.S. tax court. So it's cheap. You don't have to spend $5,000 for an attorney on a retainer to file a petition in district court. So by going to tax court, with tax court, you don't have to pay the taxes up front. The payment is deferred until the tax court case is settled. So if you get tight to the wire with paying or losing, you file a petition with the tax court. It stops all the collection efforts. Then the first thing that happens is it kicks back to docketed appeals. So you get a whole nother bite at the apple. And you're not dealing with the collections people. You're not dealing with exam. You're dealing with appeals at a higher level than you normally would. So you get people who are more knowledgeable, more experienced. You're dealing with a tax counsel for the IRS, and 95% of all U.S. tax court cases are settled pre-court. So you're probably going to get a better deal than if you're trying to fight it out with collections or an appeals hearing, because they don't want to go to court. If they lose when they go to court, then a precedent is set. So the hazards of litigation are in many cases on the IRS, not on you, because you know your maximum liability. The liability that the IRS undertakes may be far, far more than they're willing to take on.
Wow, that's so enlightening. I'm gonna make sure I encapsulate that for myself and for our listeners. So, to file a petition, $60, right, in UX tax court, and versus potentially an attorney, $5,000. That's the first thing. Two, once you are, I guess, in this petition stage, you can defer the payments. In other words, you're moving it out of collections where perhaps they don't really have the authority, perhaps they're just there to collect. And now you're going to actually fight and appeal, and you're going to defer, which gets kicked back to appeals at a certain point, or maybe during this period of time, which you're dealing with people who can actually perhaps negotiate, right, or work through this. And 95% of these are solved pre-trial because if they were, the IRS is risking not only your case, but a new precedent moving forward, which obviously could be even more costly. Is that a fair summary?
Fair summary.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And, because I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is that we don't have the leverage. Okay. I say we as the people, right? And I'm just curious, perhaps that's the part of the rewarding part is by using the law and hiring and working with someone like yourself to fight, that you can give some of the power back to the people. Is that a fair summary, or tell us more about that, Charles?
No, absolutely. This is a mechanism set up where you can, and you can do this yourself. You don't need me. For $60, there's guides online that you can form your own petition and send it in with the $60. And if you can't afford the $60 and can prove it, the court will even waive the $60. You can file pro se. But it is a mechanism that you're going in knowing your max liabilities. It's what the IRS says you owe. So you're not risking literally anything by going to this. And you, in fact, are getting a whole nother bite at the apple and a substantial chance at getting a reduction and possibly a major reduction or elimination of the tax due. Collections, they don't care. Their job is to collect the money. They're like any other bill collector. They don't care. That's not their job. Their job is to collect money. They don't care if you owe it, if it's wrong. They don't care. And that's not their job. And I understand that. When you go back to tax court and it gets kicked back to docket appeals, these people will really look at the underlying basis of what's owed and why it's owed, or why it's assumed to be owed, and either affirm or change that. And beyond that, in many cases, they will settle for a lesser amount just to get the case off their desk and move forward.
Excellent. Very enlightening. And thank you so much for sharing that. So now let's kind of shift a little bit into the capital gains tax arena. Biden administration is proposing to take capital gains tax rates from 20 to about 39.6. He's talking about potentially, he's proposing to take away the stepped up basis. Okay. Mm-hmm. To limit the 1031 exchange to a certain amount per person, $500,000. I believe single about, and a married couple about $1 million. So of what you can actually defer. So some nuances there. The final thing hasn't been proven, but I'm just curious. Let's just focus on the stepped up basis, right? The rate being 20 to 40 is intense. But what do you think it would mean, Charles, if the stepped up basis is taken away?
Well, first of all, I cannot believe that he's going to be able to take away the stepped up basis for a spouse. That's one thing. I don't think that'll happen. On the other, if he takes away the step up basis, that's going to really change the whole estate planning mechanism, because you're now subjecting your estate that you've paid taxes on and you've built to another level of taxation. And I don't know, we've talked about this in staff meetings and so on, and I don't know what the best mechanism will be. We're going to have to look at the final bill. And then, of course, a couple 100,000 of us accountants will look at it and figure out the best ways to get around it, like we always do. That's these tax acts. Since I was in college when they redid estate taxes back in '75, it was referred to as the Lawyers and Accountants Full Employment Act, because it just guaranteed us jobs. And we're smarter than Congress in that there's hundreds of thousands of us that spend months and years trying to find ways around this instead of writing laws haphazardly the way the staff does in Congress and not think about the unintended consequences. So we'll find ways around a lot of it. But one of the things that's going to happen, and I'm absolutely certain you're going to see this, when the spouse exemption stays, you're going to have a man marry his grandson, because his grandson then is his spouse and he can pass the entire estate without taxes, because same-sex marriage is now allowed. So there's going to be some very interesting things going on with the combination of the changes in the law and the changes in the taxes and the changes in spouses and everything else. It's a fascinating time to be alive, I promise you.
Yeah, it won't be able to put the headlines down. That's pretty amazing to think about. Yeah, so you pay the tax on it already, right? For those, as a reminder, stepped up basis is when you pass, right?
Yep.
Assets would get a stepped up basis to the current market value, of which your heirs, potentially even your spouse, could sell that asset and walk away capital gains tax free, right? Whereas now what they're proposing is to not only when you pass, not have a stepped up basis, but also trigger the tax that's due, right?
Yep.
And you need to pay that. So it could be an inopportune time to sell. It could mean a number of things. Essentially, what I liken to this, Charles, is they want all of the wealth or majority of the wealth with the government, right? I mean, I don't know how else to say it except they believe that it's their wealth. It's not your family's wealth. It's theirs. And they rightfully will be taking that and taking care of it. What do you think, Charles?
Well, absolutely. These people are there to spend money. They spend money to get campaign contributions and favors. If you'll look at the number of people that are millionaires in Congress that weren't when they joined, you question, where did they get the money? Where did they get those opportunities to do things? Why are they getting special treatments and special offers and special incentives? And it's because they can pass tax laws. That's what they have to sell. That's their service to business people, to investors, to whatever, to people who are willing to fund their campaign contributions, is tax favors. And so they're dispensed constantly. With earmarks coming back, God only knows what's going to happen. I mean, that was a disgrace. They got rid of it. Now it's coming back under the Democratic administration. I don't foresee anything good out of this. And with the push for socialism, well, that means that you don't need that money. We'll give you what you need, and we'll take everything else. That's not how I was raised. That's not how I believe. Rugged individualism, self-determination, all these things, what America made America great. And if we no longer own the means and the output of production, we don't have anything. If they can just take it from us at their whim, none of us are going to quit working.
I couldn't agree. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the stakes are so high. Another stat that's kind of interesting for our listeners, and it's according to the American Bankers Association, there's about 17 to $20 trillion that's going to pass from one generation to the next for the next 20 years. And this is by the baby boomers. And in fact, the same study found there's about 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day. And on top of that, there's about 77 million in the U.S. alone. And so this study of this massive amount of wealth is known as the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet. Mm-hmm. And it's happening right now or over the next 20 years, okay? Yep. And the challenge is a lot of these clients, a lot of these individuals, all these families, they feel trapped by the capital gains tax of 30 to 50%, as well as the estate tax, which is set to be 22 million married, 12 single, set to cut in half to 12 million married, 6 single. But even I think another proposal, Biden is saying 7 million married, 3.5 single. I've even heard one at 3 married and 1 single, right? So where essentially all of this wealth transfer, when it happens, if it happens, how it happens, because it's going to happen because they're going to die, right? And we're all getting older.
We're all going to die.
We're all going to die. And also another part of that stat too is 50% of the total net worth of America is tied to high-end primary homes, businesses, private equity, and also commercial real estate.
Mhm.
So commercial real estate, for the longest time, we've counted on swap, 1031 exchange until you drop and then get a stepped up basis. They're talking about taking that away. So essentially they're saying, in my mind, look, we have a chance in the next 20 years to take all of this wealth, the biggest transfer, and move it all over to the government side of things for these special interests, for these things, right? By eliminating these small things and disincentivizing people to create wealth. To me, it's staggering to think about the transfer of power and influence. What do you think, Charles?
No, I'm with you entirely. I grew up in Iowa, as I said. What's going to happen to the small farms? My family has owned farms there near Iowa City for many, many years. Well, that's all tied up in the land. You can't just say, okay, we're going to take half the value of the land and give it to the government. We're just going to write a check for it. You can't do that. The only way you can do that is to sell it to somebody else. So it's going to destroy family farms, small businesses. My business is going to my staff, so it's. But if they have to pay a huge sum of money to inherit the business from me, are they going to be willing to do that? Are they going to be able to go to the bank and say, hey, we need to borrow X number of millions of dollars to pay the tax bill? And the bank's going to look and say, well, we don't, without Charles, we don't think you're going to earn this back. So no. Then what happens? Government, and then the government's still going to demand their taxes, even though there's no value. It's insane. The power transfer to the Congress is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we believe we do have a cutting edge solution that's been around for 25 years. And I kind of want to dive into it, Charles, to see what you think and if you've heard of it before. But it's been challenged by the IRS about a dozen times, all no change IRS audits. And what's unique about it, in thousands of closes, billions under management, there's been a private letter ruling. It's a perfect track record. It's an installment sale. It's based upon IRC 453. It's called a Deferred Sales Trust. Mm-hmm. And what I think is interesting about it is a lot of these tax laws that are potentially going into place, or even the stepped up basis, even the 1031 exchange, those are all continuity strategies of ownership. Mm-hmm. So it's maintaining ownership in something, okay? And then when the music stops and you pass away, right, you were able to give it or pass it through your living trust to your heirs, and they inherited a stepped up basis and such. That's all ownership, maintaining the ownership. Whereas the Deferred Sales Trust, or 453, is based upon an installment sale. So you're actually becoming the bank. You're lending what you've owed to the government. So you say, hey, Mr. Government, I know this $10 million piece of property or cryptocurrency or primary home, I bought it for $1 million. I had this huge tax. So I'm recognizing the gain, but I'm delaying the gain like an IRA or 401k, and that I've loaned the money to a trust. Okay, it's called a Deferred Sales Trust. And then over time, I take back payments from the trust and I slowly pay tax, but I can pass it to my kids and they can step into my shoes and keep this thing going. So we believe we've kind of solved this, a Rubik's Cube for this part, and we've aligned for this perfect storm that's going on, in that we're not on the ownership side, we're on the lending side. And these promissory notes can go for as long as you want, and the kids can keep it going, at least the laws are today, unless they take that away. But the point is, it's one of those solutions there. So I'm curious, have you heard about the Deferred Sales Trust, Charles? And what are your thoughts on it?
I've only heard of it in passing. It's not really in my bailiwick. And I think it's those things are a good idea. It's, several 100,000 accountants and lawyers looking at ways to get around it. My biggest concern with that, or any tax advantage situation, is if it's used too heavily, the government will step in and change the law. And with socialists in charge, they want to collect as much tax as they can. They don't care who they get it from. And they'll change the law on you in a heartbeat. And that's terrible in itself. Is you should have a box to work in and know that as long as you obey the law, you can count on it staying the same. And in this day and age, particularly under Democratic administrations, you can't. Republicans aren't much better. I mean, we got a lot of benefits out of the Trump tax changes, but they changed, and rates were lowered and things were created, and additional 199 and so on and so forth. But I hate change in tax law because it makes everything uncertain.
Yeah, very well said. So yeah, let's hope that, Democratic, Republican, whatever you are listening to this, that these tax laws and the incentive for business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are creating jobs, that it helps to grow and stimulate the American dream and further production and further, financial freedom. Let's hope that it goes that way. All that being said, thank you for sharing on that, Charles. And for those who want to learn more about the the deferred sales trust, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We got a free ebook for you to download. And you can also go to our YouTube channel to learn all about how that works. So that being said, we are running low on time. So Charles, are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
Knowing what you know now, Charles, if you go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget you would make sure to tell yourself to do?
Invest more then.
It's a good answer. Number 2, what's the number 1 book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
Very honestly, seriously, the payroll book. I wrote it myself.
The payroll book. He wrote it himself, folks. Charles Reed. You can find him at getpayroll.com.
It's available on Amazon. Wiley published it for me last year.
Amazing. Question number 3. What's the number 1 leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
There's 2 I use. There's no traffic jam on the extra mile. Go that extra mile for your clients because your competition won't. And the other one is one I've stolen from Bill Gates, who's a little different at the moment, but it is that you will overestimate what you can accomplish in a year and underestimate what you can accomplish in a decade. So stay the course, guys, long term.
Absolutely love that. And I love that part. No traffic jam on the extra mile. That's really good. Second to last question. What are you most curious about right now?
The future. As we've talked about, there's so much change going on, so many things happening. The old saw the ancient Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. We are living in interesting times, and it's fascinating to watch people rise, people fall. Bill Gates, Fauci, Trump, Biden. It's amazing to watch the news, and I don't watch TV much anymore, but I get it online. It's a very interesting time, and it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, well said. Very well said. Last question, Charles. After helping so many people build businesses, do payroll, representing in U.S. tax court, being a CPA, how do you stay centered in your values? And how do you stay encouraged to charge forward to reach new goals?
Well, I'm very invested in my staff and my people. People is what makes business work. I love my staff. I love my clients. It's a great time to be alive in many ways, and making the business better, giving my staff growth, personal growth, professional growth, allowing them to achieve and to succeed is wonderful. My kids are all grown, but I see my staff every day, and they're not children anymore. But it's still from my advanced age, they're children to me. So it's so much fun to be the patriarch of the clan as such, and watch it grow and succeed and have fun doing it.
What a beautiful answer, and what an amazing story you have. And I want to encourage you, Charles, to keep using the gifts that you've been given, such as being tenacious and finding ways to help your staff, your family, your clients, create and preserve more wealth with the tax laws that are on the books now, and in so many other ways. And so for our listeners, could you please give them one last time a reminder, if they want to get some payroll? Hey, you want a guy on your side who's been through probably about every situation you could think of. Charles Reed is your guy. By the way, that's READ, and that's Charles Reed. And you can go to where, Charles? Where can they find you?
Getpayroll.com. My email is cjr@getpayroll.com. Feel free to contact me.
Perfect. Thanks, Charles, for being on the show. And also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, we believe is the best way for you to exit your highly appreciated business, cryptocurrency, primary home, investment real estate, save a failed 1031 exchange. We've done 7 deals in the last 40 days alone, including 3 saved failed 1031 exchanges. Also, we believe it's one of the best ways, should the Biden proposal pass, to combat one of the biggest challenges, which is the stepped-up basis, which is estate tax, with those being lowered, as well as just keeping the deferral going if you want to do an exchange on a property. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. By the way, we're also streaming on Expert CRE Secrets. So if you're a real estate professional listening, learn about the Deferred Sales Trust to grow your business. Thanks everyone for again listening in or watching. Please rate, review, subscribe.